Hey there, how are you today? Woohoo! It's Tuesday, I believe. It's Tuesday. You know, when our online platform reaches a certain stage, we need help from professionals. But how do we know whose help we need and where do we find those people? My guest today, Janet Newberry, shares how Christ led her to the three ideal professionals that she needed to move her message, which was already very well developed, but move it to the next stage. Hi, I'm Patricia Durgan, and this is Marketers on a Mission. Tutorials, tutorials and interviews to help Christian writers and speakers share their message online. And this is episode number 102, 3 key connections that helped Janet Newberry reach that next level. Hello, Janet, how are you?
I'm doing well. Hello, Patricia.
I'm so glad that you could join me. Now, where are you physically located this very moment?
This very moment, I am in Spring, Texas, and this very moment, I'm actually in my daughter's house because internet is stable here.
Perfect. Well,
Yeah.
first of what I'd like to do is talk about your projects, then your recent trip to Mount Hermon, the Christian Writers Conference, how it turned out, and then we'll segue right into those, the 3 ways that Christ helped you connect to professionals. But before we go very much further, I've got to talk about this Airstream thing. Tell me about what you and your husband, how you were connected to the Airstream community, please.
Yes, it's been a little over a year. We were praying about putting our message. I had been working with homeschool families. I'd been working as an educational consultant for a long time. I was seeing fun miracles happening in kids' lives and families' lives, and we had wanted to share it with a broader audience. And the Lord just gave us this idea. We were actually on a trip with homeschool families in Washington, D.C., and he gave us this idea on Good Friday to buy an Airstream, which was really interesting because we had never thought of buying an Airstream before. We had never been campers. We had never been RVers. And we flew home from D.C. to Houston on Saturday. We went to church on Easter Sunday, and Monday we bought an Airstream. And
No grass grows underneath it.
It was called Trusting God, and the man, when we were signing the paper, said, "What do you have to pull this with?" And we said, "We'll let you know. Right now we have 2 Toyotas." And then right after that, my husband resigned his full-time job. He was a banker, and he resigned his full-time job. We are not retired. We say we've never worked harder in our life. But as of June 23rd of 2017, we have not had a house with a slab and walls. We have only lived in our Airstream, which we've named Freedom. And my first project was actually all of last summer. I created online classes to share some of what I had been sharing face-to-face with families as a person face-to-face consultant. I put in online classes, and we travel America with a platform that we call At the Table with America, and we help families have conversations without shame. And we actually visit families in person that take our online classes.
Oh, you visit the participants.
Yes, we actually, because we have part of our online class is we have an online discussion group, and it's a closed Facebook group that's called At the Table, and beautiful things happen there. People share, they are vulnerable, they are well loved, and we just watch miracles happen in relationships on this At the Table platform. But one of the things that we know is that face-to-face is important too. And one of the ways that we meet each other's needs is just by showing them significance. And it's a beautiful thing to say, we're coming your way. We'd love to share a meal. We'd love to share a cup of coffee. We'd love to sit at the table with you. And so we actually have a map on our website, and people can see where we're going, and people will often reach out to us and say, "Hey, you're coming close by," and we'll share a meal with them. It's just fun to sit at the table and have real conversation.
Yes. How do they hear about your online courses?
Well, I'm working on that, Patricia. You could probably help me.
So is it currently word of mouth?
If you were to list all Yeah, it is word of mouth. It is email list. It is, I'm learning a lot. I sometimes say that when the Lord asked me to build a website about 3 years ago, and I was just blogging at that point, I said, God, the virtual world is my Nineveh. Send me somewhere else, but please don't send me to the virtual world, because I don't consider myself technology proficient in any way. And so it has to be God, one, that we're living in an Airstream. It has to be God that I now have my second rebuilt website. And honestly, we're going through a rebuild at the moment, because you're always learning something new and upgrading. I can't believe I facilitate online classes. That just is a joke to me for someone who feels like, it has to be a leap of faith that I'm doing all of this in the virtual world. So they find out through word of mouth. My husband and I do Facebook Lives to talk about each of our individual classes. We talk about them on our brand new podcast now, because that was another leap of faith for us. We just launched a podcast on July 4th. And so I don't know. Tell me, how else can I get them to find out about my online classes? A lot of people join because their friends have been a part of it.
Yes.
And so word of mouth is our greatest asset.
And it is, no matter whether you're online or off. That's old news to you. You've developed your whole following and done all of your experience with work and personal through those deep relationships for your whole life, haven't you?
Yes, and I love what Seth Godin says about find your smallest audience and serve them well. And I also love how he follows that out, because some people will say, well, you can do that. You're Seth Godin. And he said, you know what? 12 years ago, I wasn't. But I have found my smallest audience and I have served them well. And I do, I feel very comfortable with that form of relationship-based marketing. And so far, the Lord is using that. And we're looking for impact and influence. Yes, you want to make a living too. But I think for us, it's really important that we keep impact and influence ahead, in people's lives for good. We want to see results from what we're doing in their lives. And yes, with numbers and finances and those kinds of things that obviously you start your own business to earn. But it's very similar to what I tell families, as I work a great deal with homeschool families and in the education community. And I sometimes call myself the self-proclaimed love researcher. I say if Brene Brown gets to be known as the shame researcher, I want to be known as the love researcher, because I've spent a lot of time researching the impact of those three words, love one another. And this is a summary of what I tell families as I help them if their child is struggling with school, is that if we aim at performance, maturity will always suffer. But if we aim at maturity, performance will go off the charts. And it's the same for marketing. Yes.
Wise words. Very wise words. And they play out. That's a biblical principle. That's not just for you. And I know you're aware of that. That's a biblical principle. And they work all the time in every environment, no matter what ethnicity or what location you're in, or fill in the blank.
It's very true. And that was one area of my research. I researched adolescence. I researched educational philosophy. I researched how the brain responds to fear and love. And I researched the theology of grace. And it's amazing. The way God created our brains to work is really the way they work. We can trust him.
Well, I was going to ask you about the love researcher, because no interviewer worth their salt is going to miss mentioning that phrase. It's too tantalizing to miss.
Yes.
You're
it's fascinating, the whole idea of being in love. Go ahead.
I wanted to hear you. Go ahead.
Um, it's just fascinating that we have this one commandment, for one thing. And I did a poll for years, and I asked people when we would have dinner together, or when I would just be in conversation with them, I'd say, have you ever heard a sermon at church about love one another? And I think maybe out of hundreds of people, I've had 2 people say, I think so, but most people say no. We really, and this is what I used when I would meet face-to-face with families, and they would find me because their children were struggling at school, and children that are struggling at school are never only struggling at school. It always is a bigger struggle than school. And as I would meet with the family first, and the husband and wife, I would close the first conversation by saying, okay, your homework as husband and wife this week is to make sure your child sees you loving each other well, and that they hear you speaking love to each other, and they see you loving each other well, because it is in that environment that these struggles are going to begin to be untangled. And every single time the couple would look at me and go, what do you mean? What do you mean, make sure they see us loving each other well? And so it has been my pursuit, as I've helped children recover from struggle, and as we help relationships at home that are such a vital part of that recovery process. It's why we do our online classes for families. It's because when we love each other well, and we know what that means specifically, when we meet each other's real God-given needs, our struggles resolve. Many times you don't even have to work on the problem if you'll work first on the relationship.
Absolutely. Woo! I'm a big proponent of that truth. Absolutely. And how do you help them?
Yes, it is so true.
How do you help them learn how to love one another in your online course?
Yes, we have, it's an online course that, we have 2 online courses that are pretty big bites. We call them our semester-long online courses. And so for people who are ready to dig in and linger a long time and stick with us, we have 2 choices for that. And one is called Connect and Reconnect at Home. And one is called Loving Your Child on the Road to Maturity. And then what we've done is, for people who are just want to take a small bite, we've created, from those classes, we've created mini courses. So you can just take one module at a time as a mini course if you want to. And every class, whether it's every module, the mini courses are one module, includes a teaching video, and then a reading selection, and then a conversation video where we've recorded a conversation about the topic. And then you get to go online in our Facebook group, and you get to hash out, what does this mean in your own life? What are some of the things that you considered when you watched the teaching video, and what are some questions that you had? And then there's an application piece too that says, here's how you apply it in your relationships at home. And all the while you have access to this online Facebook group where people have become best friends. It's fun to watch the relationships develop in that online discussion group, because they really help each other out. And it's beautiful too, because the love research comes out in that group, in the sense that sometimes people will come with a significant struggle with their teenage child, or even in their marriage or something. They'll come with a struggle, and it's beautiful to watch everyone in the discussion group. Their first response is just to hear them. To hear them, and to listen, and to affirm them, and to love on them. And so you just get to watch the love research have its effect right there in that group, because sometimes that's all we need, and the Lord will answer our questions, and the Lord will help resolve the issues. Sometimes we just need to have our hurt heard, and have our problem, drag it out in the light into a safe place. And so that's really the love research is what has created the online classes, and puts some skin on, what does it mean at home to love each other well? What are our real needs, our God-given needs? And how do we sometimes hijack those when we use behavior modification or we use manipulation, because there's always one of two. Love research goes with fear research because you're operating in one frame or the other at all times. There's not another choice. You're either operating in a love-based way or in a fear-based way. And fear is what causes the struggles and the delays and the tangles and the immaturity. And so how do we learn to recognize when we're operating in a fear-based way with our children or with our spouse? And what do we change that to? How do we use a different tool in the toolbox?
I appreciate the fact that you're, excuse me, that you're talking about practical, measurable behavioral changes.
Yes.
We're not talking about fluff and theory.
No, in fact, last night we did a Facebook Live. It's on my YouTube channel today, and it was called Good Morning, Helping Your Family Have One on a School Day, because it was a participant's question, said, all I know is to use a behavior modification chart that says, get a sticker if you make your bed, get a sticker if you brush your teeth. That's all I know. And now I know that behavior modification is fear-based and not love-based. So what do I do now? And so our Facebook Live last night was about a different kind of chart that can help you set a culture of belonging in your home instead of a culture of you better be good in your home. And so we have a new free resource on my website, and it's a different way of giving parents specific support to do real life, practical things, but in a different way, because often what we've learned as parents comes from the education system, and we've brought home all of those techniques that are performance based. And so now our homes look more like school than safe places to be and find and be loved and figure out to care for one another, and that instigates sibling rivalry. And the world starts spinning in a bad direction. And so but there is great hope. That's my tagline. There is great hope.
Well, I wanted to ask,
perfect. And I want to say one more thing about that's fascinating about love research, because we know the scripture, perfect love casts out fear. One of my favorite authors that I read is Dr. Caroline Leaf, who is a neurologist. And the fear-based hormone is cortisol, and the love-based hormone is oxytocin. And cortisol is responsible for the damage that causes ADHD, that causes anxiety, that causes depression, that causes learning disabilities. Those can all be traced to the layers of brain damage from living with this slow, steady drip of cortisol, this fear-based culture that we live in. And the beautiful thing about God and the reason why he said love one another is because oxytocin is a stronger chemical than cortisol, and when the two meet, oxytocin wins every time. Oxytocin defeats cortisol every single time. So scientifically, love casts out fear, and oxytocin will repair the damage that cortisol caused. It's fascinating.
It all weaves back, the science of it, the emotion of it, the spiritual aspect of it, it all weaves back into the whole, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And that's why there is great hope, because it fits. It holds true.
I was going to ask you why there is great hope was your tagline, because it means has such rich, deep insight for you. I think you just explained it to us.
Yes, there is great hope. And I think so many times we need hope. And what we really need is to trust God. And I think sometimes hope is that step right before trust. I think if we can hope, then we can trust. But sometimes I think hope is almost a welcome mat in front of the door of trust. And if we can get there, then inside our own body systems, oxytocin is beginning to flow, and we're beginning to deal with our own anxiety and our own worry. And parents, need to know there's hope. Children need to know there's hope, but to say there is great hope and to be someone who's coming alongside them, to coach them, to mentor them, to help them, to give them a different perspective on their struggle that they're having in their home and they're having with their child, to know that there's great hope gives you the strength to take the step to do something different than you've done before. And we all need strength to do something different.
Yes, yes. Particularly when we've tried on our own and we've done what people have said. We've listened to the sermons, we have read the books, and still we're stuck. We need, and it sounds like you're the one, you and your husband are the ones who can help people break through that obstacle has been in their way for so long.
Yes, it has been in the way for so long, and we see that. That was one of the reasons we wanted to do the online classes, because as an individual face-to-face consultant, before we bought an Airstream and before we went online, we were seeing miracles happen in families' lives, and so we knew there was great hope because issues that people had dealt with for a long time. And I saw this. I spent 20 years in public education as a teacher and an administrator. I spent 7 years as a teacher and a head of school in private school. I have taken the full tour of education before I took a year sabbatical to really start the research and then start my educational consulting work. And so I'm not an outsider saying there is great hope. I'm definitely an insider. I know what the expectations are. I've sat in 1,000 ARDs, which are special education meetings when children struggle. I've chaired 1,000 ARDs. And so it isn't, I love the journey that the Lord has taken me on through the world of education so that I could look at parents now and they know my experience and I can say there is great hope.
Yes.
Because I think they trust that.
Yes. Yeah. And all of your educational experience, I mean, it's just quite broad, very in depth. Was that what God used as the springboard for you to recognize this need and then to begin to address it?
Yes, I went from 20 years of public education where, like I said, I helped a whole lot in special education. And I was the one who chaired the meetings where we helped children with special needs. And then I went to Fredericksburg, Texas, and I began to work in a private school that didn't have a special education department. And it was a totally different philosophy, and it was a totally different season of life for me. And so two things happened simultaneously. One, I say this sometimes, that I let God love me first with beauty. I trusted the love of God through the beauty of the hill country in this new season of my life. And I began to experience a healing in my own heart and an untangling in a lot of my own personal relationship struggles. Because here's an interesting thing to say as a love researcher. I was the one in public school that stood before my faculty and said, these children will not fail on my watch. I know how to get children to perform. I can get them to pass the test. We hung the exemplary sign on the wall. And at the same time, my key personal relationships were struggling desperately. Because do you know what you do to get kids to perform? You manipulate, you use behavior modification, right? It's all about compliance. It's not about trust and obey. It's fear-based. And I was taking those strategies home to my family. People don't like to be controlled. People don't like to be manipulated. People don't like to be the target of behavior management. And I was so good at those things. And so when I moved to Fredericksburg and I was in a private school that didn't have a special education program and that didn't use sticker charts, I was like, what? Wait a minute. They didn't use... I mean, I'd made 1,000 of them. And so they didn't say things like, I like the way Patricia's lining up quietly, because those are shame-based, fear-based, manipulative-based. So I had to learn a whole new language. And I watched what happened to the children in that school. And I realized what was happening to me. I was getting to act like my real self, because God says I'm a lover, not a manipulator. And I got to be myself, and I got to watch what was happening in so many different ways. And so it was after that, and we didn't hand out any medication in that school. We had over 100 students, K through 12. Our kids graduated and went to Colorado School of Mines and Rhodes Honors Program and Baylor's Honors Program, and it was a very non-traditional approach. And so after I served there as head of school for 6 years, I actually went to a classical school and served as head of their grammar school. And so I've seen a full gamut. And then I just took a year off because God had said, let's figure out why what you have seen that cause problems. Let's figure out why. And so I spent a year literally with sticky notes all over, those giant sticky pads, that are chart size. Our home was wallpapered with them because I was reading and writing and charting and reading and writing and charting. And then I started my consulting company and started doing it individually with families. And it was just like, oh my goodness, there is great hope. This is beautiful.
Are the bulk of your clients homeschool families, or is it a good mix?
It is actually a very good mix. And I would say in our online classes, maybe 25% of our people are homeschool families. And honestly, we were surprised because we thought parents of young children would be our primary clients. And honestly, I don't know how old you are, but I'm guessing that we're close to the same age. There's a whole lot of people our age in our online classes. There's a whole lot of grandparents and single people, old single people and young single people. And so it wasn't all just families. I discovered that there are many people out there who want to have a better way to relate with themselves and with God and with others, and are looking for a community that's safe. And that's one thing that we provide in our online at the table discussion group, is a safe place to be honest and be real and be heard and be loved well. And so we also have a different online community that's specifically for homeschool families. We have a dream to, and my first book project is, the working title is The New Road in Education, because I'm writing a book about my research and my experience and the miracles that we're seeing. And we have a 501c3 called John 15 Academy. And we hope that, one, it can provide support for homeschool families, but when the Lord provides funding, we'd love to make a model campus and build a brick and mortar campus for it as well.
And now John 15 Academy, is that relatively new?
It is relatively new. It is a 501c3 that is an educational entity. And the beautiful thing about a 501c3 that is not just a school, but is an educational entity, is it allows us to do the training that we're doing with homeschool families, as well as plan. We have a business plan for our brick and mortar school when that funding becomes available. And so it is new. And I operated with homeschool families, going into their homes and teaching and training the moms for a number of years as a consultant. And this year I'm doing it online with people all over. I think everyone in our homeschool group is in the United States. We actually have people in Africa and England in our online classes, but I think all in our homeschool group, they're all in the United States. And we're doing it more right now as a coaching model. And because you know what? I love that you identified me as a family advocate. Mm-hmm. Being a teacher is hard, and being a parent is hard. And homeschool parents need an advocate. They need someone to help them, because you go to a homeschool convention and what you get is curriculum, or what do you get is instruction on how to teach math, or what you should be doing in reading, or what you should be doing in science. But what we offer our homeschool community is different in the sense that we offer a place for parent, to help parents, to coach parents, to help them in their relationships with their children that are tangling up the academics with their children.
You're speaking my language. My husband and I homeschooled our two daughters from the 4th and 5th grades through their high school year, and then they both graduated from college. And those were in the years where there was a lot of pushback. People thought they were going to be Neanderthals and never bathe and would never be able to get a job, and we're beyond that. But there are still challenges. Okay, so
there are so many challenges. Yeah.
I think we have a little bit of a delay, but that's all right. We're just working it out. So you've got a book that's cooking in your mind, and you've already gone to was Mount Hermon your very first Christian Writers Conference earlier this year?
It was, and I decided to go to Mount Hermon because of a friend's prompting, and then my husband and I prayed about it, and I think I actually registered 3 or 4 weeks before the conference. It was the first time I'd ever thought of going to a Christian Writers Conference, didn't know what to expect. I've always, just like being afraid of the virtual world, I've always been afraid of the publishing world and just thought, I don't know how to navigate it. And so there are other things that I know how to do that I can do well. So can't I just stick to my, can I just stick to what I know? And God says, no, Janet, you can't stick to what you know. That doesn't require you to trust me at all. And so, yeah, it was my first experience with any kind of writers conference, Christian writers conference whatsoever. Yeah.
What did Christ reveal to you there? And there were 3 key connections that may or may not have been at that exact conference, but I think at least some of them were. How did God reveal to you who he wanted you to work with to go to the next level?
Yes, and one very key connection came from Mount Hermon, and I am a relationship girl. I'm not a performance girl, and so it's funny, I was interviewed at Mount Hermon during dinner. You know, they always call people up and let them tell a little bit of their story, and people are always fascinated and attracted to the Airstream part of our story and the fact that we travel and live the adventure that we're on. And so I got asked to come up and share that during dinner. And they said, so this is your first conference. What have you learned so far at Mount Hermon? And the maybe inappropriate but somewhat funny answer that I gave was, I've learned that I really don't want to write a book. Because it just seemed like a world that I wasn't ready to navigate. And I made my appointments with editors and agents, and I had a beautiful time at Mount Hermon. And they had a new track this time about platform building and about marketing. And I thought, great, I'm just going to focus on my online classes and my online platform. And this is great because I don't even have to pretend like I'm an author. You know, and I learned a great deal. And one of my conversations with an agent, and I can honestly tell you, Patricia, I didn't even know what an agent was when I went to Mount Hermon. I mean, I often say that I can now admit I'm brilliant in some ways, but man, am I naive. You know, and it's an interesting conversation to be both of those things. And so I had a conversation with Cynthia Ruchti, and she's writing a book that comes out in October that actually goes remarkably well with my platform and our Airstream travels and our adventures. It's called Miles from Where We Started, and I'll let her share that as part of her book launch campaign coming up soon. But she was fascinated with our story, and she was fascinated with my platform, and we became friends. And so for me, that made sense because relationship is what matters. And we stayed in touch after Mount Hermon. We were messaging. She sent me in the mail the cutest pair of shoes. They're Toms that have an RV on them, and it says, "Let the adventure begin." And through an email one time, she said, I want to talk to you on the phone. Can we make an appointment to talk? And so I said, yeah. And I'm talking to her on the phone. And I remember saying again, you know, Cynthia, I don't really want to write a book. I don't think I have time. I want to change the world. And she finally said in that conversation, she said, Janet, she said, would you quit saying you don't want to write a book because I'm calling because I want to be your agent. And I was like, what does that even mean, Cynthia? And it was a God thing. It was such a God thing because our hearts were already knit together. She knew, she had heard my platform. She had heard my heart. I did not know her aura in the Christian writing world, and she has quite extensive experience. I mean, it had to be God because I'm not pursuing her, except as a friend. And I will tell you, we've been working together since, I guess that was April, when I signed with her, and very excitedly so. And she said, Janet, you have at least 7 books to write. And so we're actually working together on a project right now about education, and we have another one in the works and another one on the back burner. But God was such a part of that because he knew, and I am convinced now in a way that I wasn't before, that many people that need to hear this message will never take an online class and they'll never read my blog, right? But they may read a book. Yes. And so I love how God convinced me in a relationship that he was going to give me someone that would be my partner, be my advocate, and help me with that. And so it was one of the key connections, that's for sure.
And the other 2 that you mentioned to me were your website developer and your podcast coach.
Yes. It's a great thing to be invited into the virtual world where you don't know what you're doing, because humility is the door that opens to real learning. And humility means you need to learn to ask for help. Mm-hmm. And, that's one of the things that school tells us is shameful. To have to ask for help at school feels shameful. And that's one of the lies that I help children untangle, is that asking for help is a brilliant thing to do. Mm-hmm. And I have had to ask for help along this journey. And I was a member of Platform University, if you're familiar with Michael Hyatt's Platform University. And I knew I wanted to do online classes, and I knew I didn't know how. And so I'd put a message out on Platform University and got a private email from a young man. He'll laugh that I call him young, but he's younger than I am. He has a young family, named Jeff Long, who is just an amazing website developer and online course coach. Oh. And so his company is called True Focus Media, and we did a free consultation. I knew that he was equipped to help me technology-wise, but also relationally. We hit it off real well. And one of the things that I always remember about Jeff is after we signed the contract and we were in an official relationship, working relationship, our first call, he said, Janet, I don't get to do this all the time. He said, I don't always work with believers. He goes, do I have your permission? Can we start this call with a prayer? And he prayed over our vision, and he prayed over our work together. And so asking for help was a great, it just opened the door to this relationship with Jeff. And actually he was on our on our route and our most recent trip. So Doug and I had dinner at the table in Ohio with Jeff Long and his family. And it was great. Nice. And he actually connected us to our podcast coach. Mm-hmm. We launched the podcast. We call it Brave Love, because love is brave. It is messy. It is risky. Love is brave. And so we named our podcast Brave Love, and it launched on July 4th, which is appropriate because love is the foundation of freedom, really. Love is freedom, and that's the name of our Airstream. But Jody Smith is the podcast guy, and Jeff Long introduced us to Jody Smith, and he is amazing. He doesn't care that we're 2 old people that don't know how to do technology. He has coached us through Zoom meetings. He's told us what equipment to buy. He's helped us with our graphic art, our voiceovers, and our background music. And he's coached us on our outline and just the way our conversation goes with our podcast. And so asking for help is a beautiful part of this marketing journey.
And that's something that the enemy makes us feel that, again, what you said earlier, based upon the school environment, he makes us feel that we're less than if we can't do everything. But Christ never expected us to be able to do everything. We depend upon each other. That's his master plan. Thank you, Father.
You just summarized my love research.
And I didn't even read it yet. Thank you so much for being with me.
It's the voice of shame that keeps us quiet. Yeah.
Go ahead. I wanted to hear what you had to say.
I said it's the voice of shame that keeps us quiet. And it is brave love that asks for help and that offers help to each other.
Thank you, Father. Thank you for being with us today, Miss Janet Newberry, what we have learned about you. And there's much more to learn as time goes on. When is your first book? You've got a sort of a general idea what you're working toward to launch that? Next year, next spring, maybe?
We hope that A New Road in Education will be available in January. Mm-hmm. And then I'm excited to get this one edited and off. Books and Such Literacy is helping us with independent publishing for this one because I have a fast timeline that I need it for my homeschool families and for our purposes. And so then we have a working title for a next book, which is called Are You Okay Being Wrong About God? And so the timeline for that is still to be determined. I know. Yeah. There is great hope.
Oh my goodness gracious. Okay. Well, I need that book. When it comes in, let me know because I need to get that book. All right. So viewers, thank you so much for being with us today. Whether you're live or watching the replay, we so appreciate you being here with us. This is Marketers on a Mission, episode number 102, 3 key connections that helped Janet Newberry reach the next level. Christ opened these doors for her. She was doing what he wanted her to do, meeting and going where he wanted her to go, meeting the people he put in front of her, and he used all of those dynamics to help her understand his master plan, the next stage of his master plan for her. Tomorrow, right here at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I'll be doing a tutorial. Haven't been able to do that for a little bit, so we're going to get right back into marketing tutorials. That'll be tomorrow. And then Thursday, Lynn Hartke will be joining me, and she's going to help us understand how she got her best book signing ever. She's going to tell us about that. Until then, I'm Patricia Durgan, the Christian Message Coach, and I pray this show helps you reach more people online for Christ. Thank you again, Janet.
Thank you. Thank you so much. What an honor.
All right, we'll see you tomorrow, everybody.